you were vulgar, especially after the extreme duress you're put under for the early hours of the game. Shinji Mikami was insistent that his monsters not be supernatural either. The zombies and creatures and everything odd about the mansion was attributable to a pharmaceutical corporation trying to create bioweapons. Hence, Biohazard is a franchise title, a name they couldn't use in America because it was already taken by a smaller game and a punk band. So they settled on Resident Evil with a Capcom office poll. Even to the developers, it was a ridiculous name. I think that ended up being a major advantage in the end. Biohazard's good, but it's generic. With a Resident Evil, you're already trying to figure out what the hell they mean by that, and that's 300% more thought than you put into something called Biohazard. It is difficult to overstate just how bad the voice acting and dialogue is here in the early games, and this isn't a franchise where the terrible voice acting and dialogue is a lot of what's famous about the later games. It's jarringly, achingly, inhumanly bad in a way you literally never see anymore unless you're looking at the deliberate Crash project. And the fact that this is layered into what's otherwise an excellent and effective horror experience just doubles down on the absurdity of everything. There are a lot of early memes that came from it and stuck with the series, mostly with Barry and Jill banter, like the obliviously suggestive, "You were almost a Jill sandwich," or the straightforwardly weird, "Here is a lockpick for you, the master of unlocking." For Chris and his companion Rebecca Chambers, there is less dialogue that's memeable because it's all just grating nonsense. Chambers is like nails on a chalkboard, and she's pretty much always just promising to stay out of the way and be positive, while Chris had his personality surgically removed prior to the start of the game and serves as a square jaw McJarhead type. At the end, Rebecca Chambers does blow up the facility if she lives that long, but her living that long depends on you telling her to stay put and not try to help out earlier. She's just an odd, extra pronounced cliche in a cast populated entirely by hastily drawn caricatures. The main antagonist, besides the mansion itself, is Albert Wesker, a cool and smooth sunglasses guy whose one goal in life is to vamp at length about world domination, a goal he will doggedly pursue across a range of sequels as he and Chris become embroiled in one of the world's most laughably stupid rivalries. Resident Evil 1 only rarely delves into cutscenes and dialogue, and thank God for that. But it's interesting how the cheesy nonsense serves as a kind of refuge from the genuine anxiety and apprehension that the rest of the game design can evoke. The camera angles used for navigation are so much more effective and interesting than any of the compositions of the cutscenes that the tension simply never carries over through whatever turgid plot beat those cutscenes convey. They function then as breaks, as comic relief, as a moment to put the controller down and say, "Whew, actually advance the damn plot." It doesn't matter what's being said. What matters is that you lived long enough to witness it. Scattered around the mansion are written notes and logs as well, which generally fare much better for writing quality. There are a few of them that are actually interesting and unnerving, and cumulatively they paint a fascinating picture of a corporation of underlings falling over each other hand over foot to please executives who had well and truly lost their grip on reality itself. It is very cool to go from seeing the mansion full of indescribable horrors, from thinking something had gone terribly wrong, only to find out down in the laboratories that every monster is labeled and named in a slideshow, that all of this was deliberate and planned, including the outbreak, that these monsters were on the verge of being given a market value. The final enemy is the Tyrant, the ultimate bioweapon, who you need to have gotten a good ending to even face in the final boss fight at all. Doing this requires extra thorough exploration, finding two hidden MO discs, plus a more obvious third one, and then using them on optional equipment in the last section of the game to unlock the other unchosen protagonist from a hidden cell. If you save Jill and Chambers as the mansion to explode for blank space anyway, you get a later fight with the Tyrant on the helipad from which you were supposed to escape. Eventually, the helicopter pilot drops a rocket launcher, the final tool for the final boss. This began a tradition Mikami carried over even to his own horror franchise, The Evil Within, that persists in almost every Resident Evil game, where this final moment is resolved not through grand theatrics, but with high explosives. I thought early on in encountering this trope that it was a break in atmosphere and mood. I've since come to feel that a break in atmosphere and mood was exactly the idea. You only get the rocket launcher once you've basically already won. This is your prize. It's a victory firework in your honor. Is this good horror? No. It is satisfying game design, though. And after such tremendous repetition of the trope, I think I finally developed a kind of fondness for it. It was cheesy even in 1996, so to keep on doing it for 2.5 decades is a real commitment to the bit. That's what's so impressive about the first Resident Evil on the whole. It established its own cliches and its own brand identity so strongly, so immediately, that no matter how wildly the later games would differ, there was always a core of recognizable nostalgic familiarity to them that connected straight back to their very beginning. No matter what you're in the mood for, with the all-new Royal Crispy Chicken lineup at Burger King, you can't go wrong. Classic, cheesy, spicy, or tangy. Reward yourself with any of the all-new Royal Crispy Chicken sandwiches today, only at Burger King. The early importance and impact of Resident Evil on gaming and games culture was cemented by how the sequel immediately surpassed the original in nearly every way. Even after playing the remake, the original 1998 version of Resident Evil 2 is a triumph for game design. Its scope is much larger, its art is much more visually compelling, its pacing is even better than the first game. It also used the dual protagonist system in a much more fascinating way. Instead of primarily mechanical differences, Leon and Claire experience entirely different plot points between their playthroughs and are designed to be played one right after the other. It introduces the idea of an A and B playthrough. Your A experience, whichever character you choose, is either on the standard or easy difficulty. Then whichever protagonist you didn't choose becomes available for the B playthrough, where the order of items and enemies is remixed and becomes a little trickier. So instead of one character being easy and the other being hard, a second playthrough is made more interesting and compelling because it has both new narrative content and new mechanical twists. In easy mode, playthrough transfers to B playthrough as well. After having been frustrated with getting jammed up by my poor inventory management choices so much in the previous game, I tried the easy mode in this one, and I actually regret playing it that way. It adds 120 extra handgun bullets and 3 first aid kits to your inventory, as well as making enemies a little easier to take down. This seems like a minor tweak as far as difficulty goes, but as the game goes on, it significantly changes the character of the survival horror experience. The fixed difficulties of the early games have tightly planned peaks and valleys of vulnerability, where the amount of resources you have ranges from barely enough to not nearly enough. In the first game, the winding and freeform nature of Spencer Mansion created extra friction because of how many inefficient or incorrect routes you might end up taking, how that could tax the limited resources available to you, to the point where you simply can't keep exploring and defend yourself at the same time. Resident Evil 2 corrected for that by not altering the difficulty, but by tweaking the level design. The mazes and puzzles of Resident Evil 2 are much more segmented, requiring more controlled order of operations that the B playthrough can then remix. This allows for inventory enemy balance to also be more controlled, to the point where it hits a kind of Goldilocks rhythm, not too generous, not too scarce, allowing for some error while still punishing major mistakes and applying mechanical pressure throughout. It only takes 9 extra portions of handgun ammunition to let me accumulate such a massive inventory advantage that I was never pressured and harried in the same way that I'd enjoyed in the first game. In nearly any other zombie killing game, I would use up 120 bullets in the first hour or two. I never even remember that I had them in the first place. But the thing about Resident Evil style survival horror, the classic style, is that it actually
Man, I'm having a tough time with this, bro.
successes and failures echo across
I probably could do better with my team management. That's a problem I have.
burn a lot of resources on the board, and you need to be much more exact when it comes to the climactic scripting points. Eventually, things tip in
Oh,
one
look, we win
direction
in this
more
one.
often
That's
towards
funny.
success or towards failure, as your instances of each begin to tally and you exhaust the environment for the supplies you need to continue. The tension comes from not knowing for so long whether that advantage will materialize. The thrill is in having
I got
manifested that
7 of them.
advantage despite the odds. 9 free ammo stacks. That's all it takes
I'm
to
not
throw
gonna lie.
off the whole system.
I'm just
It's
gonna,
tempting, I
yeah,
know, to say, oh
press
god, it's a
that.
90s game, let's turn the arbitrary cruelty dial down a couple of ticks, and I figured that was going to be the case here too. I was wrong. Resident Evil 2 is cruel, yes, but never arbitrarily or unfairly so. It is cruel in service of its own atmosphere, an atmosphere that stands out as being among the greatest out of an entire quarter century's worth of Resident Evil games. What's most immediately impressive is how much greater of a production value it has compared to the original. Laughably low-budget live-action cutscenes have been replaced by 3D rendered cutscenes that must have been wildly expensive. They're able to much better mimic the feel of the disaster movies and zombie movies that influenced the game. The scope has also been dialed out considerably, from a haunted mansion to a full-on zombie apocalypse taking place in the ambiguously American Raccoon City. The police rookie trying to show up for his first day, Leon, meets up with Claire, the sister of the previous game's Chris Redfield. Separated at the very beginning by a tanker explosion, they each then go on to begin their separate routes through the environment, for A and B playthroughs. Obviously, this style of 3D animation used for the cutscenes is pretty dated, but the pacing, the content, the stuff it's trying to convey still comes across as high energy, fun, and often cool. The datedness of it ends up going hand in hand with the deliberate B-movie feel of the plot and dialogue, creating a grindhouse synergy like you get watching the original Dawn of the Dead over the remake. It's a product of its time in a way that makes it unique and notable among the products of our time, a representative artifact of a lost moment and an artistic aesthetic that will never feel contemporary again. Unlike the first Resident Evil, there's no build-up. We don't begin with dogs and puzzles. We begin with explosions and car chase and running from hordes of the undead from moment one. Then, once you've had 10 minutes or so of gameplay to experience the scope of the disaster, to see the city burn and fall around you a little bit, it's actually right back to the puzzles and the dogs. It is so much more than the original, but it still contains all the truly interesting elements from the original. It's just more filtered
Wow, we
and
were
cleaner
close on
for
that one.
cinematic presentation. Coupled with a stronger art direction for the environments, this more planned narrative-driven direction gives the game so much more identity than even its predecessor. It feels more visceral, more present tense. The first Resident Evil, even with its atmospheric accomplishments, is a mechanics first experience. That's one of the reasons its failure states are so much easier to slip into. The progression is more open to player driven jumbling, mixing up of what's intended to be the ideal order of progression beyond certain event gates. Those event gates happen more often in Resident Evil 2, which not only reduces the chances to seriously screw up your save file, it also keeps the momentum of play moving much faster than the original game. Resident Evil games exist on a spectrum of horror-driven and action-driven design. With the
Okay,
first
that's
Resident
a good
Evil
one.
sitting on the edge of the horror side, and say Resident Evil 5 sitting on the edge of the action side. The games begin to move steadily from one end of the spectrum to the other before ever beginning to move back again. But they do begin to move backwards in an attempt to find a sweet spot balance between cinematic bombast and self-directed anxiety. Resident Evil 2 might just be that sweet spot. Both the original and its remake are among the best games in the franchise, effortlessly compelling and incessantly savage. Are they the scariest? Not quite. Compared to the first game, terror is less of a priority. There's more balance between emotions of fear and emotions of power than in the first game. It's a balance that the franchise would spend years trying to find. While the game is essentially bookended with dramatic action-oriented sequences, the broad majority of the game takes place in a police station that is undoubtedly the least plausible civic building ever put in a video game. The Spencer Mansion got a pass for being unlivable because that's the trope of a
Okay.
big haunted house that's filled with secret passages, hidden rooms, and deep attics. When the person designing the house has more money than rationality by a large margin, like with the real-life Winchester Mystery House, you always get a fascinating result. The fact that the Spencer Mansion had an underground laboratory that wasn't just lone wolf mad science, but quarterly budget corporate science was a fantastic twist, an actual twist on the base cliche. The Raccoon City Police Department is the exact opposite, taking a place that is usually, by design, a utilitarian land government building and then adding absurd, gothic, mad science twists that have absolutely no explanation for being there. The remake adds a note that's like, wow, isn't it crazy they built a police station inside an abandoned art museum? But the original doesn't even bother, just tosses it at you like it's completely normal for all the locks to be themed after playing card suits, for important items to be hidden inside sculptures, and for rare gems the size of your fist to be scattered about inconveniently. It operates on Legend of Zelda dungeon logic, and a lot of the same props of Legend of Zelda even, but blended with what otherwise is still mostly a police station. Locker rooms, offices, interrogation rooms, a jail, an armory, a morgue, a file room, all the administrative necessities. They exist in equal proportions with the video game nonsense, which is strange, but not entirely off-putting. There is a strong sense of uncanny unreality to the entire thing, which also contributes to its strong personality. It's a Japanese game franchise, which makes its fixation on Americana especially entertaining because it gets a lot of the feel right, but struggles sometimes with the specifics. Raccoon City, for instance, is a typical Midwestern town that's near a desert, forested mountains, and the city of Chicago. Obviously, that doesn't track, but caring about that failure to track is like saying, you know, guys, I don't think 123 Main Street, Anytown, USA is a real address. Of course it isn't. It's a suggestion in your mind of a certain mid-sized Norman Rockwell burg with white picket fences and white picket people and a lot of small shops where you can still get a malt soda and have your vacuum cleaner repaired. Leon Kennedy's police uniform, like the stars uniform Jill Valentine was wearing last game with her little beret, just doesn't look especially American. The cars are from all sorts of different eras and styles. DeLoreans and Cadillacs and Crown Victorias, all crashed and burning in piles of debris. Saying it's pastiche doesn't quite express it because it's a pastiche of things that don't always go together and some things that never even were. It's a pastiche where imagination is filling in a whole lot of blanks I take for granted by growing up in the culture. The cumulative result is a setting that feels believable and real because it's so clearly not the world after women. Because it's such a strange and uncanny otherwhere and otherwhen that if Leon can look like this on his first day and no one comments on it, then hey, zombies, why not? This is intensified by the lushness of
Good
the
thing I'm picking it smart
absolutely
so I don't
perfect
just,
starfish.
lose right there and there.
Not
That's
only is
cool.
there more environmental storytelling per square
Um,
inch than even
well,
the
that was
best
nice.
Bethesda RPG, the fixed camera angles frame that storytelling for maximum impact. The game has a baseline of being unsettling and strange, which the game intensifies with its environmentally inappropriate touches of style, all the hallways and rooms of the police station which appear as grander and richer than even the Spencer Mansion. It gives an impression that anything could happen. The chief of police, for instance, is a serial killer and a corporate collaborator who uses the chaos of the zombie apocalypse to sabotage his own town's defense efforts, ensure the destruction of his own police force, and to kill the mayor's daughter so he can preserve her corpse in taxidermy. And all of that is just a small background subplot in Claire's story only. He even has a whole medieval looking torture chamber complete with a giant wooden wrought iron dungeon door right below his police station office. This would be treated in any other game as being, at the least, notably strange. In Resident Evil 2, it's just a casual detail. One of those things, sometimes the police chief is a bribe taking, daughter murdering psychopath with a tremendous dramatic streak. Why not? Many instances of horror media obsessively establish a sense of normalcy and then pull tension from how that normalcy is subverted and eroded into the unthinkable. For Resident Evil, the horror comes from the sense that there never was any normal, and in turn, anything that happens now will just intensify the insanity already present. No guarantees, no expectations, just a swirling mouth of madness, unhinging its jaw and turning, smiling in your direction. As you get deeper into the game, you move away from the human cost of the zombie apocalypse and pivot towards the perpetrators of it, the ever nefarious Umbrella Corporation. Underneath the town sewers is a tram system leading to a sprawling underground laboratory network, the Nest, a much larger laboratory than the previous game. So there's still the secret basement thing going on, but since the scale has expanded to a city over a mansion, the basement expands to an equally metropolitan scale. Over and over, you'll find memos and correspondences and lab reports that all explain the motives behind the events. Apathy and greed. Nothing more. Umbrella has a majority stake in the town, in its industries and its services. It owns the property and means of production, so it goes to follow that if they own the town, they own the townspeople. While Resident Evil Zero had some especially weird extra backstory for how the T-Virus was initially unleashed, the original backstory was notable for how generally matter-of-fact and blasé the villains of the piece are. Why make a zombie plague? Because it kills a population and leaves the infrastructure mostly intact. It's more civilized in a certain way than a bomb's indiscriminate blast. It's just obviously useful. Sure, it could end a civilization or whatever, but it also makes some serious money, which is the central dilemma of any defense department contractor. So, luring the STARS team to the mansion, that was one diagnostic test of the weapon system. Obliterating Raccoon City and recording its death throes, well, that can be another. Imagine having actual figures on citizens devoured per minute to put in the brochure, the free marketing of an internationally recognized disaster zone. On the one hand, no one with an ounce of human compassion would do any of this, but phrased in the clinical ways of the game's scattered files, there is a certain darkly, absurdly comedic sense to it. Even if it destroys the town and hurts the company some, how else to better debut a new arms race for bioweapons than by demonstrating how much a government will need one as a counter-deterrent? It waxes and wanes between different titles, but there is often an undertone of political context and commentary to most of the Resident Evil games. Often it's a campy exaggeration of obvious truths, like the bottom dollar ruthlessness of the healthcare industry and defense complex. But sometimes it'll toss in a more jagged and direct barb among the cheese and among the gore. It is an odd mix. Resident Evil is, for the most part, difficult to take seriously, and at its best when it's at its most wild-eyed and manic. By keeping any actual seriousness hidden in the margins like the extra ammunition jammed into drawers and cupboards, it doesn't lean on gravitas it hasn't earned. Ideally, Resident Evil would just build its own commentary like its own believability through granular environmental detail, where if you just look at the blood on the walls and trace it back to its source, the whole sequence of events becomes wordlessly clear. This is much more true of the early era than the middle era of the franchise, where the subtext becomes the actual text in a way that damages the credibility of both. Here, though, the blend is more even, more clever, more conducive to the work of building the empire than to trying to maintain one. Claire's campaign focuses more on Umbrella and on those narrative elements than Leon's does. We get to see what was, for 1998, a pretty complex picture of the villains behind this newly lettered, slightly different G virus. Besides the curveball of the serial killer police chief, these antagonists are more grounded than before. William Birkin and Annette Birkin are scientists who have worked on the virus simply for their professional challenge. When Umbrella comes to claim its property and shoots William, he injects himself with the virus and becomes, a huge Mr. Monster Man. So you've got the T-virus zombies up above and the G-virus boss monsters down below, which is a compelling mix of old and new across the environments. Annette Birkin's characterization mostly revolves around the fact that she is a terrible parent. She has no idea where her kid is, cares more about her work than her daughter's survival, and generally goes out of her way to hinder everyone because she thinks that she knows better. It's kind of a sexist cliche about driven women, and even in 1998 there was criticism about the game's dated gender tropes. It's not egregious, it's just little things that come from a those crazy dames kind of perspective where women are inscrutable, emotional, and fragile. Is Claire a badass? Of course, and so was Jill Valentine in the last game. People talk about sexism in games like it's an either-or kind of thing, and I'm sure I'll hear paragraphs on paragraphs about how it can't possibly, and how could I say such a thing. But it's not even a heavy condemnation. I'm just saying that in the grand scheme of things, the game that assumes that Claire would willingly wear pink denim jorts and a black tracksuit out of the house goes on to make some other real dumb assumptions about women. The remake gives Claire something that looks more off the shelf and revamps the dialogue considerably. Plus, to be fair, Leon's getup is equally clownish here in the 1998 original. Maybe I'd be more sympathetic to the finger-wagging at the bad lady scientist if the daughter, Sherry Birkin, wasn't such an unbearably annoying sidekick character through much of Claire's campaign. If you get too far ahead when she's following you, Sherry will just sit down and pout and wait for you to come back, which is just about the most passive-aggressive